Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video, I'll be reviewing the DM's Guild mini-adventure, The Struggles of Stelmane, designed by Matthew Whitby with JVC Parry for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your DM's Guild shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shouts to my platinum patrons, Andrew, Richard, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick, Andy, and Chris. And gold patrons, RPG Papercraft, Starman Grenade, Pretty Boy, Numa, Marcos de Vicente, Gilberto, Sean, AK, Cert to be Adam, Dizzard Lounge, Sam, Marash, Lumpy Spuds, and Jerome. Thank you all very much for your support. And the Baldur's Gate 3 trailer made me super excited for Illithids, which I think is one of the cooler of the classic D&D monster villains. And they've been really underused in the 5th edition campaigns. Obviously, they're a part of Out of the Abyss, but they're pretty much just regulated to the Underdark. And the Struggles of Stelmane puts in Illithid hunting a noble, not just any noble, but one of the Dukes of Baldur's Gate in a city. So it's a mini urban adventure, which is really cool. And it's a really intriguing idea for an adventure, is to use that whole brain control, mind meld thing that the Illithids can do, and actually put them in a kind of political, urban, social context. I think there's a lot of really neat storytelling that can happen from that. That being said, I think the Struggles of Stelmane has a cool start to it, but really fails to capitalize on that intriguing premise, especially with the final third act ends up being really disappointingly straightforward and simple, to the point where I was really like, wait, that's it? It's already a very short adventure. It's designed for levels. It's actually a tier 2 adventure designed for level 6 and balanced to where you can level up to 7, which, by the way, if you have a really, really short mini adventure, maybe don't include a level up halfway through. Maybe other folks like level their characters up really, really quickly through their adventures. But in my experience, especially once they reach, I understand tier 1, you can get through those levels pretty quick. Once you reach tier 2, you want to have your players in those levels like quite a while, because that is the real meat and potatoes of D&D, and there's no way in hell that the very little bit, like one mini dungeon crawl in here, is enough to level players up. Even, maybe if you're like already close to 7, that might be a thing, but just don't worry about leveling up your players if you have a really small adventure. If you have a full, campaign-sized campaign, then yes, include some level ups there. But otherwise, if it's a pretty short adventure, it always weirds me out to see that. Like, this part is designed for level 5, and this part's designed for level 6. Like, just create what you think it should start at, and then maybe make some notes in there like, hey, this section is going to be a little harder, or better yet, create the balancing table that a lot of folks include, which is, here's for APL parties of level, 4 or 5 and 6 and so forth. So that's just kind of a weird aside that I saw through here. It is well organized. It's well formatted. It's got solid, artwork, and it's got kind of the Adventure League. I always think it's funny to see a flowchart that's literally just kind of one after the other. I don't know if I consider a flowchart at that point, but hey, why not include that? It's sort of mentions it can be tied into Descent into Avernus, but from what I remember from Descent into Avernus, the Baldur's Gate stuff is very low level right at the beginning, and then eventually you end up traveling to, I believe, Candlekeep, and then teleporting down to Avernus once you reach like level 5, and then I think you're in Avernus for the whole rest of that campaign. So it's, other than the fact that this adventure takes place in Baldur's Gate, I don't see how you can actually tie it into it. I don't think Descent into Avernus has anything to do with Illithids, and I don't see why you would ever return from Avernus to Baldur's Gate at like level 6. So it's very weirdly connected. What I would have liked to have seen is using this setup in different cities along the Sword Coast. So say, this is built for Baldur's Gate. It uses one of the Dukes, but you could, plop this into any city on the Sword Coast. Basically, all you need is a major city that's got nobles and a underground, like an underground network of tunnels, which probably all the cities have, and a sea cave. So obviously Sword Coast. So I mean, Neverwinter, Waterdeep, Baldur's Gate, Luskin, like any of these places. And it would have been really nice to see, like, hey, if you want to use this adventure. Here's how to, here's the different tavern names. Here's the different nobles you could use, et cetera, et cetera. Would be really nice to see. Instead, it's just basically says, all right, this takes place in Baldur's Gate. Here's all the playing characters and all that, which is Duke Belene Stelmane, who ran afoul of a Illithid in a previous altercation to where she was partially attacked. She had half her face is locked up, kind of. She's got a seizure. She's got all these nightmares and things. She's basically being influenced by the Illithid, but not completely controlled by it. She is kind of winning the battle. She still has her own, personality intact and everything, but she fears that the Illithid will come back to finish the job, which of course she is absolutely correct on that. So the players come in when they can either be summoned by her directly, or they can meet a kind of a crime scene outside of a tavern. Actually, I think they're supposed to meet her aide, which is this Allen Roft character, in the tavern in Baldur's Gate, and they can either see a fight scene between a bunch of thugs, in which case a intellect devourer bursts out and then tries to kill these other thugs. It's always fun to see intellect devourers. They're the face huggers of D&D, which is really fun. They're like little unassuming creatures, but they have an incredibly powerful ability to basically auto kill somebody and then take over their body, which is fucking incredible. We should see more intellect devourers in D&D 5th edition. And the players then can follow the clues to either meet, I guess they meet with Allen, and then they go into this seaside cave as they track this intellect devourer down into Duskhawk Hill, and then into the what is a cave that was inhabited by werewolves, but has now been taken over by the Illithid. And the Illithid's named as Grucht, I think. Wants to just supplant this noble, which is a great idea for an Illithid to take over basically one of the high-ranking leaders of a city and then slowly convert that entire city's politics into helping their Illithid colony. All of that is cool. I like that idea. I like the backstory. All of that is really cool. We get a little mini dungeon crawl in the sea cave layer, which has this friendly little wizard running around because she's the apprentice, and her master has been taken over by one of the intellect devourers, and now has a bunch of like brains they're growing as part of the Illithid's machinations to slowly take over, people, and it's all very cool. And I like this little dungeon crawl a lot. There's a shaft into the tunnel that, of course, leads up into the noble that the Illithid is trying to catch, which is all very cool. Like, I'm on board for all of these things. Like the first act, getting the story. The second act, which is this cool little mini dungeon crawl, although I'm not a fan of this art style, as you all who have seen my reviews before know that I prefer my nice full color, lovely maps, and not these kind of Dyson Logos-esque graph paper basic map designs. That doesn't really do it for me. I'm glad that we got a map so I can visualize it, but this is not something that I can actually use, so that's a bummer. The third act is when things fall apart for me. So the tunnel leads up into Stelmane's mansion, her villa area. We do get a map for that, but of course, unfortunately, it's the same design. Either the party can leave that Illithid dungeon, go back on the top of the city, and just and they meet with their quest-giving NPC, who tells them, "Hey, my boss wants to meet with you," the actual Duke Stelmane, and they can just go in the front door and talk with her. And then she says, "Okay, well, if the tunnel does lead here, then let's go down and check out my cellar." You go down to the cellar, and the fucking Illithid is just waiting there in the shadows and just attacks the party, and the party can defeat the Illithid, and that's it. It's super disappointing. Or conversely, if the party follows the tunnel up, then they end up in the cellar, and then if they're searching around, they find the Illithid, and if not, then the Illithid just does a surprise attack. They defeat the Illithid, and then they're in the villa, and they can just go up and say, "Hey, we took care of that Illithid problem." Like, it's so disappointingly straightforward and simple for how cool Illithids can be, and the fact that they've got, he's already been working on supplanting a bunch of people and taking over their bodies with the intellect devourers and all that. There's so many cool directions we could have taken this without necessarily making it that much longer, because this is a very, very short adventure. The whole product's only 17 pages long. I mean, off the top of my head, you could have it where turn it into a third act horror movie and have it be where all the guards are slain, and there's just a bunch of like intellect devours running around, or there's those the werewolves that the Illithid took over. Maybe they used those mind-controlled werewolves to do all the dirty work of going in and just so he can get at the boss, at the Duke. That could be a way to do it. Or use the whole intellect devourer thing and have it when you come up, everything is normal, everything's cool, we're all cool here, and everybody's like, no, don't worry about the the Illithid. We took care of that a while ago. We're all fine. And of course, everybody's been taken over by the Illithid and the intellect devourers. That both of those scenarios have been really, really cool and interesting. Instead, it's just extremely straightforward. Like, you just find the Illithid just hanging out in the cellar like a bad horror movie villain, like a slasher, and you just fight him, and that's the end of it. It's super disappointing because Illithids are so cool, and there's so many cool things you can do, and it was setting up to where it was going to be something cool with having, in that dungeon, you had that one mage and the werewolves who had been taken over by intellect devourers. So we'd already kind of foreshadowed the fact that the villain had a bunch of not evil people, but was using them. And that could have added these interesting moral complications for players, where that one apprentice mage was like, please don't, kill my mentor. Let's just try to help him. And it mentions in the rules that, like, she would help the players, but she doesn't want them to kill her mentor. So it would require like a bunch of priestly spells and money and time to be able to heal him, assuming they can take him down at the end of that dungeon. So they'd been setting all these great things up, and then it just fell completely flat in this final act by being so simple and straightforward. The only notes we're given is this sidebar that just mentions if the players for some reason leave and rest or something, and basically just let time go by, then the Illithid does complete his job successfully, take over the Duke, and then if the players show up, then she's like, hey, everything's fine now, you can go away. But there's no rules about can the players figure out what's going on, or are things really weird, or is there what's the cool role-playing scene here where the players can try to roll insight checks or do something. It just mentions the fact that basically the adventure is over at that point. If the Illithid succeeds, the players show up, she's fine, even though her brain has been replaced, and it's just over, and that's the end of the adventure, which is super disappointing. So it's a big bummer because I really liked the idea behind this adventure. I think it started out really strong. It's well produced. I mean, it's got a very standard formatting and layout style, which I think the standard is good in the 5th edition supplement products. It pretty much looks like you tore it out of a player handbook or whatever else, which I like that format quite a bit. Font is a little small, by the way. For me to read it comfortably, I had to actually zoom in, which is never a good sign. Usually I'm able to read something with this 80% view, so that's a bit of a minor complaint. But yeah, my biggest complaint is obviously I'm not a big fan of the maps, but just that third act just really, really falls flat. And just because you're using such a cool monster and you've set things up in such an interesting way, then to leave us with basically the Illithid is just lurking in the cellar, just hanging out until nightfall to then spring his plan is a big bummer. That's disappointing. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for the Struggles of Stelmane. Pros: an intriguing premise of Illithids and intellect devours in an urban adventure. More Illithids, please. Love them. Want to see more of them. And the other pro is that the product has a solid organization, layout, and artwork. No complaints in that regard. I think it looks very professionally produced, and I do like to see that. Cons: as I mentioned, a disappointingly straightforward, easy finale. That whole third act is just lame. And the basic graph paper map style. I don't know if it's literally the Dyson Logos has done these, but certainly this one looks like that style. But it's to where I would not actually use these maps, which is too bad because I think the actual map design of the mansion and the cave are perfectly fine. It's just that the style is not something that I'm super into. Final verdict: the Struggles of Stelmane sets up an intriguing urban Illithid mini-adventure, but falls flat in the third act. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com, and you can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson, and you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.